In July 1944, as World War II still raged, 730 delegates from 44 Allied nations arrived in the sleepy town of Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Behind closed doors in a grand hotel, nestled in the White Mountains, they crafted a new financial world order, one that would determine the fate of money, power, and empire for the next century. This wasn't just economic policy, it was economic warfare in a tuxedo. The world was burning, but the victors were already planning how to rebuild it. With Europe in ruins and America rising as an undisputed superpower, the need for a stable economic system was urgent. The 1930s had seen currency chaos, trade wars, and the Great Depression. Now, the Allies wanted to prevent another catastrophe and to make sure no single nation could game the system. Two men stood at the center of this ideological showdown. The first was John Maynard Keynes, the brilliant British economist who had revolutionized economic thought. He envisioned a fairer, more flexible financial world, one where no nation would be forced into ruin to protect another's wealth. His plan involved a new currency, the Bancor, and an international clearing union to balance trade. Across the table sat Harry Dexter White, a tough, fast-talking U.S. Treasury official with the full backing of Washington. White wasn't just defending American interests, he was designing a post-war world where the U.S. dollar would rule supreme. While Keynes wanted equality, White wanted dominance. And the U.S., now lender to the world, had the leverage to get it. For 3 tense weeks, debates flared behind the walls of the Mount Washington Hotel. Smaller nations feared domination by big powers. The British wanted breathing room for their war-shattered economy. But in the end, compromise and American muscle won out. The world would get a fixed exchange rate system, anchored to gold. The dollar would be the center of gravity. On July 22, 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed. The U.S. dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Other currencies would peg themselves to the dollar. To enforce the system and provide financial support, 2 new institutions were born: the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. These weren't just financial tools, they were instruments of global governance. The IMF would ensure exchange rate stability and short-term lending to prevent currency collapses. The World Bank, meanwhile, would provide long-term loans for reconstruction and development. Both were headquartered in Washington, D.C., not London, not Paris, and certainly not Moscow. The message was clear. The U.S. was now the banker and the boss. Thanks in part to Bretton Woods, the post-war economic boom took off. The Marshall Plan flooded Europe with American capital. The new fixed exchange system offered predictability. Trade flourished, industries revived, and a consumer-driven middle class emerged across the West. It was the golden age of capitalism, and it was made in Bretton Woods. The dollar wasn't just currency, it was influence. With most global transactions settled in dollars, and with the U.S. controlling the gold supply, Washington gained unprecedented soft power. Bretton Woods didn't just rebuild the world economy, it tied it to American prosperity. But with great power came great temptation. By the 1960s, the system was starting to strain. The U.S. was spending heavily, both on the Vietnam War and domestic programs like the Great Society, without increasing its gold reserves. Dollars flooded the world. But America's ability to redeem those dollars in gold stayed flat. Foreign countries began to worry. Was the U.S. printing more than it could afford? In 1965, French President Charles de Gaulle called the U.S. bluff. He demanded that American dollars held by France be exchanged for gold, and even sent a ship to New York to pick it up. Others followed. The U.S. was bleeding gold. The system designed to ensure stability was now undermining it. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon stunned the world. In a televised address, he announced the temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. In reality, it was the death of Bretton Woods.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
The world shifted overnight from fixed exchange rates to floating ones. The dollar became fiat currency, backed not by gold, but by trust. The collapse of Bretton Woods unleashed a new era of financial turbulence. The 1970s brought inflation, oil shocks, and currency volatility. Countries now had to defend their economies without the safety net of fixed rates. For the first time in decades, the global monetary system was truly unanchored and vulnerable to market speculation and geopolitical shocks. And yet, the legacy of Bretton Woods lives on. The IMF and World Bank still shape economic policies worldwide. The dollar remains the world's reserve currency, used in 88% of all foreign exchange transactions. But critics argue the system favors the rich and powerful, leaving developing nations with debt and dependency. Was this the hidden cost of post-war stability? Today, the global balance is shifting once again. China, Russia, and the BRICS nations are challenging U.S. monetary dominance. Digital currencies and blockchain promise decentralized alternatives, and calls for a new Bretton Woods-style agreement grow louder, especially in the wake of financial crises, pandemics, and rising multipolarity. The question is no longer, what was Bretton Woods, but what comes after it? In the shadow of the White Mountains, the echoes of 1944 still linger. The men who gathered at Bretton Woods set the rules for a world they hoped to control. But even the best-laid plans are bound to unravel. The dollar may still wear the crown, but the game it was designed to rule is changing faster than ever. In the shadow of the White Mountains, the echoes of 1944 still linger. The men who gathered at Bretton Woods set the rules for a world they hoped to control. But even the best-laid plans are bound to unravel. The dollar may still wear the crown, but the game it was designed to rule is changing faster than ever.